was a friend of mine on murder. The judge's gavel fell. The jury found him guilty. Gave him 15 years in hell. That I ain't living my life here. No, I ain't living alone. Ain't breaking no rocks on the chain gang. Breaking out and heading home. Gonna make a jailbreak. I'm looking for the sky.
Anyway, what's going on, voice heads? We're here to talk about the late, the great, Mr. Bon Scott. Mr. Bon Scott is, he's right here. This is my guy. I do a lot of singers, a lot of greats, anybody who I feel has like a kind of unique, powerful, special technique that I think that you and I can learn from, especially if they use some type of rasp and vocal distortion. We talk about him on Voicehead. I'll probably do Michael Bolton pretty soon. I don't love his music, but he's got a very distinctive voice. He's got a lot of technique. Not to pick on him or whatever. Anyway, I think we all love him after the Captain Jack Sparrow video that he did with Lonely Island. Anyway, so we're talking about Bon Scott, death by misadventure. He died in 1979. Everybody thought he was completely irreplaceable in AC/DC, and of course he was. Nonetheless, one of the great rock and roll stories. Brian Johnson had these gigantic shoes to fill. He was an absolute no-name. Everybody, with a following and a powerful rock tenor, threw their hat in the ring to try to join AC/DC. Everybody kind of thought that they were done. They hear everybody they can. They go with this essentially a no-name singer. He had like a couple of hits on like North British, country music, singing rock and roll. And, he went to the audition, it was just like, oh, well, thanks for having me, guys. I don't really know what's going to happen with this, blah, blah, blah. Malcolm called him like a week later and was like, hey, we want you to be in the band. He's like, you got to call me later. I can't handle this right now. Can you call me in like 5 minutes? And then he was like, you got the job. We want you to sing. We're sending you a plane and flying you to the Bahamas to record a little album called Back in Black. The only song that Bon Scott is credited for writing off of that album is "Have a Drink on Me." That is a Bon song, and it's got that Bon cleverness to it. Bon was a great lyricist. One thing that people don't know about Bon Scott, and especially for us who want to try to sing like him a little bit more, is that he was not a rocker. He came up in this band called Fraternity, which I don't know if you've seen Spinal Tap, but I'm convinced that the first band that they were all in is based on this band Fraternity, because he goes on to be like, maybe the greatest hard rock legend of all time with AC/DC. And before, it's, as they say in the streets, triple ply soft music. Fraternity, maybe sometime we'll get into it. But the thing about Bon Scott is he is like an R&B guy trapped in a lead rocker's physical body and in the band, but his technique is all R&B. It's a little bit, it's high larynx for sure. It's not Brian Johnson high larynx, and it's very dreamy. He was fond of the bottle. That explains some of it, and I'll show you that technique involves the back of your tongue to create that kind of languorous, dreamy, kind of drunken sensation. Back of the tongue. Ozzy Osbourne, back of the tongue. Okay, any of those kind of people that put you in like a trippy trance just from the sound of their voice, back of the tongue. Okay, we'll get into that technique. Now he uses rasp and vocal distortion, of course, but he also would go in and out of very clean sounds. He's a master of variety, as we'll get into with a little number, something like the one I'm about to play you in just a moment. But so just some things I want you to listen for on the outset. He's able to use vocal fry to create a heavier sounding mechanism than it actually is. And he was an R&B singer. There's somebody who was talking about hearing him sing in the shower, and it was just like magic. I forget who it was, some lady who, said that, she used to hear him singing, I guess, like in his apartment or whatever in the shower. And it was just something just kind of magical about this guy and the way he would, carry a tune and weave a story. Bon Scott is a storyteller. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to share this screen and we are going to get into this fabulous concert out of 1977. This would be 2 years and change before he would tragically pass away. But we are going to enjoy the magic of Bon Scott, and not just enjoy it, because this is Voicehead. We're going to learn from it. So, without further ado, let's check out some Bon Scott. This song is amazing. Hell ain't a bad place to be. Okay, real quick. You will notice that Australia produces a disproportionate amount of great rock tenors. Why is that? Because they're all getting bitten by terrifying spiders? Possibly. A more plausible reason, though, is these vowel sounds they have. They're sorry, my Australian. I'll get into the Australian, and it'll be better by the end. You gotta work your way into it, mate. But they have these weird little vowel sounds that you can take up way high in your register and communicate the same language without our clunky American O-A-E-I-O-U vowel sounds, which, a lot of these vowel sounds, it has to turn into once you get into your, certainly once you're into your full head voice. If it doesn't, your voice is going to crack. The sound doesn't exist. Simply think of like a bass tone. Eventually that formant needs to change because that sound quality doesn't exist past a certain range. So listen to his, first of all, how nasal he is, and then all these little extra vowel sounds that he has that you probably don't if you're from the States. All right. The great Angus Young. All right, I'm gonna skip ahead. It's to verses. Yeah! Got that gremlin-y sound. Okay, so he's got some chorusing on that. It's always good to sing live with a little chorusing. Now, sometimes I think this woman is kind of hot. Notice how his mouth is not opening very much. Let's take a look. Hey you! Ah! His mouth didn't know. Ah! So you'll notice that he starts off, so obviously super forward, super, that stuff, but so you get that. Sometimes I think this woman is kind of hot. He starts off these phrases and then I'll end them with more rasp and distortion than he has in the middle. Oftentimes the middle will be very snivelly, as my bandmate says, very snivelly, the middle part. So sometimes I think this woman is kind of hot. Something like that. You know, push me down, fool me around. He'll kind of yip up into that even lighter mechanism. So that's kind of a head dominant, basically a reinforced falsetto, and then it'll flip into what we call flageolet range, which is basically your falsetto above falsetto. Think, David Lee Roth intros for a good example of flageolet range. Plus, he uses a little vocal fry, of course. What you doing to me? Ooh, that ain't the way it should be. Ooh, I don't know exactly. I'll have to dive into that later. But so just to kind of add a little bit more context to his vocal technique, you can see he's got his lips like this, like almost kind of like a naughty, like spoiled royalty, right? And he kind of moves his mouth. He uses a very similar mouth embouchure to the rapper Lil Wayne. There's somehow a connection between Bon Scott and Lil Wayne. I don't think that he would have died in enough time to be. No, I think he might be a reincarnation. Lil Wayne might be a reincarnation of Bon Scott. Look into it. Okay. And then, yeah. Pause my beer. So when he gets lower, then he'll kind of introduce the, more of the Howling Wolf false vocal cord distortion. Pause my beer. Right? You hear that? Pause my beer. But he doesn't go, sometimes. It's tempting to do that when you're learning AC/DC. Now, Brian Johnson will do that. But Bon Scott does not really use false chords in his head voice so much. Alex Meyer. You gotta wink to the camera. Yeah. Mine was a little knurdly, got a little potatoey. Yeah. A little bit of vocal fry, a little bit of false chords on these kind of like asides. Now, one thing that's interesting about Bon Scott, I might have talked about this already, but some people think that he had this very distinctive voice because his larynx was actually damaged in a car accident, and it created these kind of abnormalities, I guess, kind of asymmetries in the way his larynx would like operate. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if there were kind of like asymmetries in his sound based on his larynx being physically affected. In any case, don't try to replicate that. Drive safely. Don't drink and drive. But in any case, that's part of what explains kind of like his wild sound, possibly. But I really want to get into talking about the back of the tongue. Yeah, right? I really want to get into that. Okay, so that you hear some vocal fry, but also false chords. Just a little bit. Spends my money! Spends my money, drinks my booze, stays out every night. Right? And so he'll do that every night. Another thing that kind of creates this drunken effect is every night. He'll slide down slowly at the end of these lines. And you'll also notice, now this is very subtle. Part of AC/DC's sound is you've got, in the event horizon of, a bar, you've got the drums are at the absolute tip of it. Bass is right behind. Malcolm right on it, right in the pocket. Both leads, you get this feeling that they're a little bit like drunk, hanging out of the side of the car. They're not totally on the beat. They're a little bit behind the beat. It's part of AC/DC's sound. They're just a little bit behind the rhythm section, and it creates again this kind of drunken feel to it that makes their music so fun. So kind of grinds as something ain't right. Right. Oh yeah, listen to that. Telling me your lies. Right? He probably did a little bit less than that, but he goes in and out of these mechanisms. So he's one of these singers like Rob Halford that's characterized not by their consistency, but by their ability to surprise vocally. Okay. I don't mind you playing demon, baby. You can almost in this picture, you can see that the back of his tongue is like a little bit lifted. Can you see what I'm talking about? This is Bon Scott's whole technique. The back of his tongue is very, very kind of puffed up and very, very smooth and very, very legato. It's similar in that way to Ozzy. Generals gathered in the mess. I haven't done as much work with that one, so I'm not getting his weird accent right. But the ways they kind of create this like smiling texture to the music is all in the back of the tongue. Mess around with that. See if it works for you. When on that me, he dropped the back of it. Just as long as it's with me. You heard that? He dropped the back of his tongue there for effect. Come on, play. Uh-oh. Oh, he did it. Man, is he good. I saw hell! Hey, faces like this. There ain't no bad place to be! Woof! Okay, stopping the screen share. All right, so yeah, I mean, Bon Scott, kind of the greatest to ever do it. That was not a great example of how he's like an R&B guy. There's other songs where that's on display more. I mean, that one's a rocker. You know, he's bringing it full bore with the vocal fry. You know, the way he phrases stuff is not like the studio albums when he does it live. That's kind of a hallmark of AC/DC vocals. When I do it, I kind of want to give people like the studio experience. But there is this kind of spontaneity of how they kind of like attack the groove differently. You know, I'm sure a lot of that is informed by just being out of breath, you know, and then a lot of that is like just kind of interacting with the audience as well. Anyway, so yeah, the essence of Bon Scott, I mean, he's using a kind of similar vocal fry to a lot of rockers. He goes back and forth between vocal fry and false vocal cord distortion, a combination of both those. That wasn't a great example. Hell, ain't no bad place to be. You know, and a lot of times you make these crazy sounds, and then if you can switch back to a cleaner sound, you can stick the landing, right? So that's like a great tip is this is why I love Bon Scott, because he's weaving in and out of these, like, you know, a more modern metally, you know, kind of like distortion and like classic R&B singing and just, you know, great rock belting, as well as all that. So anyway, we will definitely be talking more about Bon Scott on this show. So stick around for that. Check out some of our other videos. Please like, subscribe, and share the Voicehead Show. We can't thank you enough. Leave comments. I answer everybody. I try to answer everybody. So please ask me anything, any comments. Thank you so much, and stick around.